I was regarded at Harvard Business School as being a communist.
This one is a bit of a mystery still, when my first tweet is going to happen.
Ken is fun, and Ken is a great friend to Barbie.
I call it catching the F train.
I was this fat unit, you know what I mean, in a suit, and it was clear that I was not the same as the others.
Hello everybody, welcome to number 11 in our series of Better Marketing. A really significant one today in this, the year of WFA's Pledge to the Planet. And we're upcoming is COP26, or as some of the press are already calling it, COP Out 26. And I'm delighted to welcome today Sonia Thimmiah, who's got a great title, one of those ones that needs a very wide business card. Good morning, Sonia. How are you?
Hello, David. Hello there. Very well, thank you. Delighted to be here.
Great. Well, great to have you. Do you want to tell us what your title is and show us the width of your business card?
It is one of the longest titles I've ever had, I have to say. So my title is Head of Sustainable Brands and Customer Partnerships. So it's pretty long, and I work for Reckitt.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, and looking forward to talking to you. But can we wander back a bit, because I know we've got a similarity here in that I was once agency and became a client, and you were once a consultant. So what's it been like bridging the world of consultancy and becoming in-house, as it were? And I know you've been at it for a long time already.
I have. I've been in the sustainability world for over 20 years, and I've seen it change quite remarkably over that time. Firstly, I'm really appreciative of all my years at consulting, because I think what it provided was a really strong foundation and a technical expertise in understanding the wide range of sustainability issues that we have, and being able to apply it to a diverse set of industries. Everything from telco to financial services, mining, and of course, consumer goods. And I think what that brings is a real understanding of how you apply sustainability in different cultures, different types of companies with different issues. Now, the switch over to working in-house has been very much more about driving change from within, having the ability to own specific issues which require attention, co-creating and working with others in the business to figure out what are the solutions, but then actually seeing them through to delivery. And it's working through the ups and downs as you go through that process has been a real learning. And what I've loved about moving in-house is being able to see something through from strategy through to execution and seeing the outcomes that we have as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that last word is possibly one of the most important ones, the outcomes, because as Greta Thunberg so beautifully says, enough of the blah, 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 time for some actions. But can you unpack a little bit for us what it means to deal with sustainable brands? As you know, my good friend Mark Ritson has a lot to say about purpose and brands in particular. I won't quote him here because today we're going to be swear-free. But tell us a little bit about your sustainable brands, what that actually means, what kind of outcomes you're seeing, if you wouldn't mind, Sonia.
No, very happy to. And I can understand why there's been a bit of skepticism when people talk about sustainability and also the wider purpose agenda. So what we think about as sustainable brands is, firstly, to really think quite forensically about what are the social, environmental, and economic issues that are relevant to our brands across our value chain. It is a multidimensional beast. And the first role is really to understand, what does that breadth look like? And where do we focus as a brand? What are the key issues where we can really maximize our social and environmental impact? And how do we bring that to life to drive that impact and those outcomes you were talking about? And in a way that we can message it powerfully to our consumers, our customers, and to our other stakeholders as well. But it's really that piece. And it's interesting what you were saying about Mark's views. And I've heard about some of those views, and particularly about how people are greenwashing, purpose washing, I think. I'm also trying not to use some of the sweary words, but I understand why that is, because I think what a lot of people have seen are the words, not the actions. And I think the world is changing and the brands are changing. And what we see is, for brands to be really relevant in a future that we have coming at us, we really need them to drive a lot more action and for people to see that in very tangible ways.
So what's your favorite case study that you can tell us about, where you're proud of the actions you've taken and the outcomes you've got?
Over the last few years, we've been on a journey to really unpack what do we mean by purpose, because it is this term that's used quite liberally. And we started with, what does a brand do? What does the brand stand for? What is it known for? What products do we have? What's our footprint? And based on that, we looked at what is the key issue or cause where we could most meaningfully contribute. And to do that, we started with the world's best to-do list, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we looked at it, and for each brand, it's a different issue because our brands do different things. And to try and bring this to life a little bit, let me give you an example with what we've done with Vanish. So Vanish, as many people know, is a brand that's known for reviving clothes, for having products which help remove stains, remove odors, improve whitening, brightening colors, but we're on a mission to do a lot more. With Vanish, we're on a mission to give clothes many lives. And that's a bold statement. But what that means is really looking at what's happening in the fashion sector and what role do we want to play beyond just the product that's really going to drive a lot more circularity than what we have now. So what we've done in terms of real action and outcomes is we've looked at it, and given the magnitude of a lot of the issues that we see across the sustainability agenda, we know we have to partner. We cannot solve these issues on our own. So we've partnered. Through Vanish, we've partnered, for example, with the British Fashion Council, where we've been involved in a research project to really look at how do we drive much more circular practices in the UK. We've also partnered with Marie Claire. With Marie Claire, we're developing a second-hand aggregator, which brings together the multitude of platforms that you have, like hardlyeverworn.com. So there's a one-stop shop where people can buy second-hand. So for us, the purpose journey has been much more than what is it that our product does, even though the product plays a key role in that. It's about looking at something that's authentic and credible, where we go far beyond it to say, how do we really inspire behavior change with our consumers to influence the way they buy, wear, care for, and then pass on their clothes?
Wow. And have you looked at, there's some vocabulary that we're all very familiar with now that pre-pandemic we didn't know. So I don't recall anybody ever talking about the supply chain in years gone by. But have you been looking at the supply chain for Vanish and your partners in producing Vanish as part of that journey?
No, very much so. When we set up on the purpose journey, what we were really conscious of is we had to start with our own house. So very much before we start elevating purpose and talking about it externally, we go through a very strong due diligence process across our supply chain, but also looking at our product portfolio to say, what do we need to do to step up? Where do we see that there are challenges that we need to address? And it really, for us, it's been a great catalyst to see about why do we want to make changes as well.
And what is this doing for one of my favorite subjects at the moment, which is employee engagement? Again, I think if we look at, what the pandemic has caused, I think we're facing into that thing beautifully called the Great Resignation, where lots of people are going enough already, either because they don't like their job, they don't like their company, or they want to change their life. I mean, are you getting traction with your colleagues around this agenda?
Yeah, I feel very lucky to work on a topic where people are super passionate about looking at the wider social and environmental impact we can have. Because the beauty of sustainability is we're catalysts. We don't do a lot of the delivery. For it to really work across the business, we have to get the marketing, the R&D functions, the packaging functions, procurement, finance, HR, all to work in the same direction. And what's great is from an employee engagement perspective, it is definitely one of the topics that has the highest levels of engagement.
Yeah, and I was listening to the CEO of Coca-Cola recently at an event, and he was talking about purpose as well. And what he talked, I love the point that he made, which is purpose has to get done by people. And unless people are passionate about this, you'll get nowhere. But can we move? That's wonderful to hear. And I guess you've got the metrics to back that up. But let's talk about metrics for a minute, because, in the world where what gets measured gets done, what kind of metrics are you using? What do you put in front of the board to show progress? What are you being challenged on? That's about 17 questions in one, sorry.
I'll try and pick them off one by one. And I completely agree with you. When it comes to sustainability, there are some areas which have been measured for many, many years. So especially around the environmental agenda, when you look at our impact on climate change, if you look at water, if you look at energy, typically those are measures that are readily measured and reported very widely, internally and externally. I think what we've seen as the evolution from a metrics perspective is how do we think about measuring social impact as well, not just environmental. So we have a range of metrics across the business that are tied to the key sustainability goals that we've defined for us as a business. And we report those externally once a year. And internally, we report them more frequently to assess progress, where we're going, what needs to be course corrected. What I will say is, one of the things that I'm really pleased that we're doing is we've developed a measurement for measuring the impact of our purpose journey as well. So for each brand, thinking about three lenses. Firstly, to what extent are we reaching people in terms of messaging that we have related to the sustainable development goal that we've chosen? To what extent are we reaching people through the communication that we have? The second is, to what extent do we engage them to really drive behavior change in a very real way? And the final lens is to see what the impact is. So as well as the top level corporate metrics that we have for sustainability, we have a set of brand metrics as well to really assess the progress of our purpose journey. It's early days. Anyone who's working in this game will tell you that it's not as if it's done and dusted, but I'm really pleased that we have a framework that has started the process.
And again, this is not a phrase I like, but mostly because it was coined by a politician about sustainability being a journey. And two aspects for you I'm fascinated by is that, 20 years ago when you started compared to now, what a remarkable shift. So how have you seen your personal journey in that? And then to build on that, where is Reckitt in its corporate journey and how do you think you're doing?
So I started my career straight out of engineering, working at a very technical level in manufacturing sites around the world, working in very male-dominated environments, talking to people why they really had to care about climate change. Now, David, can you imagine how that went down 20 years ago? it was a hard battle. But what I really saw was over months, it's all about messaging. And I worked at a gas terminal in Peddlethorpe in East England over a period of 6 months. When I first got there, we had the site manager who basically said to me, I've been running this plant for 20 years. What can a girlie like you tell me about how can I do that better? It was 20 years ago. Roll forward 6 months. And we've gone through a few sessions where we talked about climate change, water, what's happening in the world, the social divide. And he came up to me and he said, I was having dinner with my wife and we were talking about climate change and what a big deal it's going to be. So 20 years ago, getting that initial level of traction was hard and it took time because it wasn't in our psyche, it wasn't in our conversation. Roll forwards now, I would not have that same conversation. When we speak to our business about sustainability, people are aware of the issues. There's a much greater level of awareness. There's a much greater drive for actually wanting to see us do the right thing. And the question isn't, do we have to do it? It's how do we do more? So the conversation has changed fundamentally in the last 20 years. And I think a lot of that's down to an increase in levels of awareness around some of these issues. Don't get me wrong, I still think we have a way to go in terms of translating that awareness into action. But we're in a fundamentally different place now. And I think what we need to do now, looking forward to the next 10 years, is capitalize on that attention to really drive investment and action to deliver real change.
Fantastic. And as for Reckitt's journey, how are you feeling? Positive?
Yeah, so Reckitt, I hate that word journey as well. It means so many things.
We'll pivot in a minute. There's another word I hate.
Oh, excellent. I mean, we can play word bingo. We can play word bingo as we go through this. So for Reckitt, sustainability isn't something that's new. We've been working on it for a while. Our last strategy came out in 2012, and we had a bunch of targets that took us to 2020. Now, in 2019, we sat down and did a very thorough review of what are some of the key global trends that we see, what's changing in the world, and how do we position Reckitt successfully in a turbulent, ever-changing world. And we did it in the year of COVID. We did it in a year where people's consciousness about environmental issues fundamentally changed. We did it also in a year where we were coming up to COP26, which you referenced before. And earlier this year, in March of this year, we came out with a new set of ambitions, our sustainability ambitions, which had a set of targets for what we wanted to achieve for 2030 and beyond. And you'll notice I very deliberately call them ambitions, not a strategy, because we did not want it to be separate to our business strategy. We have a business strategy. It's about delivering sustainable outperformance. And what we do in the sustainability agenda is very much part of delivering that overarching goal. And it's very much about seeing sustainability as a lever for growth. I think for us, now it's about double downing on actual execution to make sure that we have the right programs and actions across the business to deliver on those ambitions.
And how about from a shareholder perspective? I remember when I was asked to lead the work on the renewed purpose of what's now the NatWest Group. I think it was February 2018 when I went with my work plan to see the wonderful Ross McEwen and share it with him. It happened to be the same day that Larry Fink's first letter had arrived, talking about the expectations of ESG and investing, and from a shareholder perspective. And you could see the power across the business and businesses of that shareholder intervention. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, very much so. In the last 5 years, the number of investor queries that we've had have gone up substantially. And I see that as really positive, because what they're starting to do is linking the financial success of our business with how we do business in a much wider context. And they're starting to look at the long-term success of the business, not just the short-term returns that we deliver. And I think, what we've seen is the rise of a lot more sustainable indices, which really look at that wider consideration of the business, which I think is really positive. And also, based on the investor questions we get, they've become a lot more informed. They're fairly detailed in terms of what they're asking us for, in terms of climate change, packaging, what we're doing around diversity and inclusion, human rights. So the diversity of the questions have grown, but also the level of questioning in terms of looking at outcomes. It all comes back to outcomes, has also really increased.
Yeah, so I think, we've touched on the people inside the company, we touched on the investors, but let's turn now to consumers, because I remember meeting one of the owners of H&M about 10 years ago when they were on their sustainability journey and charging a premium for their sustainably produced clothes. And one of the things he talked about is there wasn't any consumer pull at all, and there wasn't any consumer appreciation of the importance of the agenda. Now, that was 10 years ago. What about now? Are you seeing consumer pull? Are you seeing the same awareness in the day-to-day purchase of your products?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a strong uplift in terms of consumer expectation around what we do. And that comes across in a number of ways. Firstly, in terms of what they expect from our products. So they're expecting much more sustainable products in terms of what goes in it, in terms of the chemistry, what goes around it, in terms of the packaging. But they're also looking for brands and products to have more than just a transactional relationship with them where we're selling products. It's much more about what's a wider story, what's a wider impact, and what's a wider difference that you want to have in the world. And all our consumer research shows us that that has gone up and up and up. Now, I think where we're still looking to see more traction is, will that change then in terms of buying behaviors when they then go to the till? And that is still to be proven. But if we look at the trend in terms of consumer expectations, that's a huge driver as well.
So this is perhaps a good bridge into, how do you see the role of the CMO and the role of marketing on this agenda, and how are you partnering with your marketing buddies?
Yeah, I think the marketeers are absolutely critical in this journey. Our marketeers shape the strategies for our brands. They shape our innovation pipelines for the products that we bring out. They shape the partnerships that we have in terms of delivering on impact. So the way we've gone through the journey on purpose-led brands is it's been driven by marketing. We are advisors, and the brand leads, the category directors, as we call them, absolutely own how they shape purpose for their brands.
Wonderful. I think that's a great intervention on behalf of marketing. So, for instance, I was often caused to bite my lip when I sat in front of the board at RBS talking about purpose, because they would be saying things like, it's not really a marketing thing, is it? And we're I'm going to say they were rude and offensive. And the reason I can say that is I know none of them will watch this. But I think in contrast, if you look at the role that Keith Weed had at Unilever and that Connie Brahms now has, without a marketeer who is central to this and understanding how important it is to the brands and the customers and the company, it's difficult to drive the agenda forward. So great to hear you celebrating the role of marketing. Many don't, and they should.
No, do you know what? I think they are absolutely crucial, and it is very much about how we partner to make sure that the messaging that we have is authentic, and that partnering has been really important for us as we've gone through this process of really unpacking how do we do this in a way that feels like the right thing for the brand, but moves the needle in terms of the issues that we really care about. Because the issues are really varied. If it's Finnish talking about saving water, through to Durex who's talking about sexual well-being and breaking some of the taboos around sexuality. There's a wide range of issues that we talk about. And what's really important is the marketeers are the voice. They shape the voice to the consumers and to the outside world of how that brand comes across. So they're absolutely critical in this, and they're front and center for sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of our, I'm going to describe it as fun interventions at the WFA global conferences has been an event we call Lipstick on a Pig, where
Yes.
where actually, it's fun, but it's serious, because what we do is wave our bullshit cards at work we think is not delivering on the authenticity of all of this. I'm going to guess that that's part of your role, to kind of look at what is actually being communicating.
Absolutely. Part of our role is to hold that mirror to the organization, to say, yeah, there are certain things we can't say, be it in commercials, be it in claims that we want to make. I think we have to be really careful not to overstep the mark. I hate seeing propositions out there that people say are eco or sustainable. The question that we always ask is, what does that really mean? My pet hate is seeing a bunch of words that don't have any action or activity behind it. There's no point in doing that. Frankly, I think given the transparency that we see across the industry, increasingly any brands that do stand up without that solidity behind it in terms of what it's doing and what it wants to drive across its portfolio, I think there's a real risk that they get shot down, frankly, because people start seeing through it. So we play a really important role, and not just on our own, but with our legal colleagues, with regulatory, with others across the business, to hold that mirror up to say, okay, can we really say that? Are we comfortable saying that? Does it stand up to if this blows up, what would our response be? Yeah, we take it all the way through to look at different scenarios to really make sure that what we come out with does have that authenticity and the evidence-based view, so we can have the right positioning.
Yeah. And when we kind of look globally, and I'm still in the Reckitt world here, are all boats rising at the same pace everywhere, or are there some geographies that are slightly behind? And how do you deal with that? If so, I'm not prejudging that there are, by the way.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Would I say that we have everything at the same level across the business everywhere? No, absolutely not. I think there's different levels of maturity in terms of different programs, in terms of different executions, and how we see things playing out, for sure. Your question on the geographic side of things, what we've seen across the globe is there's a different level in terms of how people look at issues, for sure. So across Europe, the noise on sustainability is very large. No surprises. If we look at our consumers, if we look at our customers, the expectations that are coming down, even if we look at regulation. So if we look at something like extended producer responsibility for packaging, it's absolutely the highest somewhere like Europe. It's a very different story when we look at other parts of the world, but it's coming. And that's what we see. And I think there's also a bit of misconception. So my cultural background is I'm Indian. I was born there, lived there for many years before I came across to the UK, and the British education system made me sound like this. And a lot of people think that, in India, there's not that same level of awareness, for example, when it comes to environmental issues. It's actually not true. When we go back and when we speak to people, levels are rising in terms of the extent to which people care about these issues. Now, As an organization, what we need to do is prioritize action and make sure that we've got the targeted delivery where we need it. Is it going consistently everywhere to the extent that I would like it? No. But is there a direction from the top that we want to bring all the boats up to the same level over time? Yes. And I think that's the bit that's important.
And then obviously one of the greatest spokespeople on behalf of all things sustainable is the wonderful Sir David Attenborough. And one of my favourite quotes of his is, "No one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about the things they don't experience." Now, when I heard that, I was thinking, does that mean if I haven't been to see the glaciers retreating, I don't experience it? And I think the other thing he's talked about is that sustainability is actually in one part a communications problem. Do you think communication can bridge that gap implicit in his first quote? Because I've been lucky enough to go and watch the glaciers retreat. Oh my God. And see where they've shifted from and the speed they've done it. And it brings you a different level of awareness. Is there a role for communications there?
If I compare and contrast plastics with climate change, two huge issues that we have, and I see the extent to which people have really grabbed onto the issue as an area that needs action, they've had very different trajectories. So with plastics, again, coming back to Sir David Attenborough, after he brought out the documentary, A Blue Planet, we saw a fundamental shift across industry, across society, at the extent to which people thought, wow, this is an issue. This is a huge issue that we really need to tackle as a world. And the reason for that is plastic was tangible. We could see it. We saw the shots, the really powerful images of turtles caught in nets, of the amount of waste that we have in our marine environment. And it was really powerful. It was tangible. It was physical. We connect with it in our homes. And I think we've seen a much greater level of awareness of the action that's needed across the plastic agenda. Now, when I talk about sustainability, one of the questions I get asked is, what do you think is the biggest issue we as a world need to address? And every time I say it's climate change. Climate change, climate change, climate change. And this isn't a new issue. We've known for years about the contribution that man-made greenhouse gas emissions have to climate change. We know that we're hurtling towards a scenario where we're going to see global warming, which does have the glaciers melting at a rate that's unacceptable. That will mean that we lose areas of land. That means we have even more extreme weather events. We're already starting to see the impacts of that. It's going to impact our food supply chains. Climate change is the number one issue that is going to affect us across both environmental as well as social dimensions. But we've seen a much lower level of awareness and action, frankly, on climate change. And I think part of that's because you can't see it like you can see plastic. So the communication challenge is to make it real. To make it real, to make it visceral, to make it an issue where people want to act to the same levels that I've seen with plastics and packaging. So I agree. I do think we have a communications challenge here. And again, I think this is where marketeers and creatives have a real role to play to bring that level of awareness around climate change to help drive the action that we absolutely need to see at a much greater pace than what we see now.
Yeah, and Sonia, let's then finish by touching on COP26, because that from the outside has the look of a massive talking shop, and I'm bringing out my inner cynic here. What's your hope for COP26? What would you like to see at the end of their conversation? And indeed, what are your expectations?
We as business, I think, have a very key role to play when it comes to the climate change agenda. We can absolutely lend our voice, but the other thing we're doing at COP26 is we're bringing our convening ability to talk about issues that we care about. For example, talk about the nexus between planetary health and human health, which for a company like Reckitt, which works across hygiene, health, and nutrition, is really central to how we operate as a business. It's very little discussion of health at the moment and how climate change is driving some really significant impacts on health. The increase in pest-borne diseases, increase in air pollution, for example. So what I really hope, so my great hope from COP26 is that we do actually see a step up in some of the policy commitments, and we see the starting of a roadmap to make that real. Because for anyone who's been in the COP game for a while, this is an annual conference that comes together, but it's an opportunity for governments to commit And I really hope we see some of those commitments and we get the strong signal that we as business are looking for. But regardless, as business, our role continues. Our role continues in terms of the actions we need to take to really address climate change effectively as well.
But, you know, in my experience, the people engaged in sustainability inside companies are the most passionate. They have often been the most frustrated because nobody paid any attention. But now is your moment. So great to hear it. Great to see you making a massive impact. And then at the ridiculous end of the scale, see this logo here? Oh, it's that side. Not
Yes,
so long
just
ago,
about.
it looked like it was heading a football round about there. And that football was a piece of olive oil. It was an olive oil stain. It's gone. Why? Because of Vanish. So thank you very much. And with
It's
that,
a pleasure.
so thank you again so much. And thanks everybody for listening in. Great conversation. Looking forward to our Christmas event where we'll have the joy of speaking to another outstanding woman in the marketing industry, Fam from Nigeria. Till then, take care. Bye.